Hey, I'm Kyle Racky, and you're listening to the Proposify Biz Chat. On today's show, I'm talking to Dan Martell, who is a Canadian entrepreneur. He grew up in a really bad situation, escaped a life of crime when he was very young, and ultimately learned how to code, scaled multiple businesses, and sold them for profit. He's now helping other entrepreneurs learn to scale agencies and SaaS businesses. Check it out. Hey everyone, I'm Kyle Racky here, and I am talking to Dan Martell. Really excited to have him on the show today. So Dan is a serial entrepreneur, speaker, investor. He ran a company called Clarity, which he sold just a couple of years back. And he's a great example of somebody who has overcome all kinds of odds to achieve success in life. He's built and sold 3 tech companies now. He dedicates his time to coaching other entrepreneurs and SaaS businesses to scale. And we actually had his lovely wife on the show just about a year ago, Renee, who talked about her company Onboardly. So very excited to have the other half on today. Welcome to the show, Dan.
Thank you, Colin. Definitely not the better half. We both know that I married up. I always tell people you should never trust the man who didn't marry up.
I specifically said other half, not better half.
I know. I love that. Keep things honest.
Yeah, you got to. So, thank you for being on the show, Dan. I think anybody who, is listening to this or watching this and hasn't heard of you, you tell the story better than I could. Can you just kind of lay it out?
Yeah, I'll just tell you the short version because I want to get into talking about how I can add as much value as I can to your listeners. But my story is kind of funny. Some people start out of entrepreneurship and they're like they're like level playing field. When I think about it, it's like I had a hole. It was like dug, and I was in the hole. And it really started back when I was a kid. I grew up in a really challenging environment. My mom was an alcoholic. My dad was in sales, always on the road, and I got diagnosed when I was 11 with ADHD. So, at a young age, I thought I was broken, because, you think you're normal. I had 2 brothers and a sister, and all of a sudden you got to take a pill every day that totally makes you feel different than who you are. So you're like, geez, maybe the normal version of me is not the right one. And I just started acting out and getting angry. And by the time I was 12, I got taken out of my house, put into a foster home, and that kind of snowballed out of control. Unfortunately for my foster dad, I was his first and last foster kid ever. The moment when I lit off firecrackers, Roman candles in his living room was the straw that broke the camel's back, and I got put into a group home. And that's, when I was 13, 2 things happened. My parents got divorced, and I got introduced to drugs through some of the kids in the group home, and life just got crazy from that point on. I actually ended up in jail for 6 weeks when I was 15 throughout the summer. Got out, said I wasn't, I was going to clean up my act and get through that. And I lasted a day, full day, until I started hanging out with people that I was hanging out with before. And a year later, when I was 16, I found myself, running away. I stole a car. I had a handgun in a backpack sitting next to the car, because I said if I get pulled over, I get stopped, I'm going to pull the gun and let the cops do their job. And I'm driving down the highway, and I take an exit, and there's a routine roadblock, and I stop, and they asked me for my driver's license, and I didn't even have a license. And when they said for me to pull over to the side, I took off, and I was trying to get away. I figured if I get to the woods, I'd get away from the police, and ended up in a neighborhood, and I saw an open garage door, and I just gunned it, and I thought I could get in the door and close the door, and I ended up coming around the driveway way too fast, smashed into the side of the house, and went to grab the gun. And when I went to grab it, it got stuck. And, I could hear the police coming, and next thing I knew, the doors opened up, and my feet didn't even touch the ground. I got thrown in the back of the cop car, and I woke up sober the next morning in a jail cell. And, wow. I knew somebody was looking out for me, because that was not my plan. And here I was thinking to myself, somebody's looking out, and if they help me get through that, and I didn't know what I was looking at. But I was going to dedicate my life to giving back and doing what I could to be a better person, honestly. And it wasn't until I got sentenced over a year, but I did 5 months in an adult jail. And there was a guard, Brian. I got in a fight, ended up in a solitary confinement after 3 days. He wasn't there when the fight happened. He pulled me out. He was always kind of like one of those guys that was kind of like a good guy. If you treat him with respect, he'd kind of do right by you. And he kind of walked me back to the jail cell, but we walked past the door where all the other inmates were. We went into kind of the guard unit that overlooks the cell block. I'm going to circle back why this story is relevant to agency owners.
I know the story, and it's like, it's super relevant.
Yeah. And, you know, he sat me down and he asked me why I was there. And I said, well, I got in a fight with this other kid. And he said, no. I said, why are you here? And I said, well, I stole a car and I had a gun. And he goes, Dan, I've been watching you for, you know, since you've been here, and you do your homework and you try to stay out of the politics and you try to be a better person. And he said, you don't belong here. And he said, if I'm the first person to ever tell you, I believe in you. And at 16 years old, that was the first time anybody had ever said that to me. And something shifted. I mean, it literally changed my mind as to what was possible for my life. And I ended up doing a few more months there and got released to a place called Portage, which is a rehab, a therapeutic center for drug addiction teenagers. I did 11 months of therapy, and towards the end of that, I was helping this guy Rick. He's like the kind of care guy. He does like all the handyman stuff. I was helping him clean out one of the cabins. And there was an old computer and a book on Java programming. It used to be a Bible camp, so they had like an old 486 computer, and I loaded it up and went to the command line and typed in, you know, the Java exec, and I wrote my first Hello World reading this yellow book on Java programming. And, you know, it was exciting for me. I was like, I've never touched a computer. Here's this book. I understand theory. If you ever looked at JavaScript, I mean, that's Java. So it kind of reads like English. And, you know, when you get through major addiction or, you know, you get healthy, you create a hole, and essentially that programming. And then when I got out shortly after, the internet, which turned out to kind of be a big deal, literally became my new focus and my passion. And I went all in. And, you know, I've built 5 different companies. The first 2 are complete failures, Maritime Vacation and NB Host. I started young, though. I started when I was 17. And by the time I was 24, I built an agency called Spheric Technology, so over 30 employees and millions in revenue, and sold it when I was 28. And that, you know, it was during that process that I started angel investing in other incredible companies. And I was blessed. I still remember the day my accountant called me. I was driving up on Von Harvey in Moncton, New Brunswick, if you know where that is. And he's like, you want to hear something cool? And I was like, what's up? And he goes, you're a millionaire. And I was like, okay, that's a random thing. He was more excited for me than I was for myself, because like to me, I didn't care. I mean, we had been doing, I think we did a couple million in revenue, but I literally was just reinvesting it in the business. I drove, you know, at that time, a 1992 Volkswagen Jetta. Like, I was just a simple dude that just was super grateful for where I was in life. Because I mean, yeah.
You bring up a really good point, and this has been on my mind too. You look at you look at people like Gary Vaynerchuk, and they're really like not fancy people. I think it's a mark of the true entrepreneur. Like, when it's in your DNA to be an entrepreneur, I really believe that it's not about the money to buy fancy things and to look the part. It really is about the game and just loving being in the game and wanting the money more so for freedom and flexibility and less so for buying shiny objects.
I think it's the build. I mean, Gary and I have talked about this. Like, it's literally, you know, instead of having all these fancy things that are really just I want people to judge me for my ideas and what I create. Like that, those are the two things. I don't want you to like me because of the car I drive, my wife, the lifestyle I live. I want you to want to be my friend and learn from me because of my ideas and the companies and products I've built. And anytime I've gotten capital, I've just redeployed it in my business. That's why I started angel investing, because I'm like, man, I love these businesses and the ideas, and I want to align myself. And it's just like, you know, I remember one of my mentors saying, it's like, why buy a new car when you can invest in 4 different companies? Like, you could have that new car, or you could take that same capital and put 4 bets on incredible companies, and it's more fun. I've never not, like, I know I've probably put $500,000 to work in my companies that I've invested in, and I've probably gotten like $10 million worth of education and knowledge and market information, and you know what I mean? So yeah. Like,
and then you get a return even better.
And on the top of that, I've made millions of dollars in my angel investing, right? Yeah. Like, you know, it's just not fair. Like, it's kind of crazy, but I just feel blessed, man. Like, I literally, Mark Cuban invested in my last company, Clarity. I got invited to spend a week with Richard Branson a couple years ago because of my work with Clarity. And I come from a small town in Eastern Canada, 100,000 some change people. Like,
yeah, for those listening, we're like 3 hours apart. Like I could I could jump in the car and drive 3 hours and go hang with Dan. So
yeah. So I mean, growing up, you know what it's like, man. It's like we're geographically challenged right out of the gate, especially for what we do, and we have to work that much harder. And it's not impossible. We've got great role models like Radiant 6, Marcel Lebrun. We got Jerry Pond. We got all these incredible people that have gone before us. But we need to think about it. We need to push it.
And I think the world is smaller than we sometimes realize because, yeah, we're geographically challenged, and yet we're building great businesses out of Eastern Canada. But it's so easy, to hop on a plane and go and fly to San Francisco or New York or Boston or Toronto or anywhere where like the action's happening and people are. It's really not that far away, and you did that, you maybe
every 7 weeks. Yeah, I had a pattern. I was talking to a friend of mine, Eric. He built a company called Terminus out of Atlanta. And I was like, congrats. They just announced a $10 million Series B. And he goes, I said, you did it even in the fact that you're in Atlanta. He goes, that's our competitive advantage.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? Thank you for fixing me on that, because you're absolutely right that it can be an advantage if you know how to execute it properly.
100%. I mean, even just access to talent that doesn't cost, $150K a year.
A quarter of the cost. They're loyal. You just got to do some things, like you said, get on a plane. So like every 7 weeks when I was building my last company, Clarity, the previous company, Flowtown, I built in San Francisco. Clarity, I raised the money from San Francisco. I told them to wire it to TD Bank, Moncton, New Brunswick. I remember one of my investors asked me, like, where's this place Moncton from? Like, trust me, we're going to make it work. And, every 7 weeks I would get on a flight and I would go to New York, San Francisco, Toronto, and back home. And it was like clockwork. And most of the people still thought I lived in San Francisco because I would see them 7 times a year.
And you actually lived in San Francisco at one point. I remember you saying
5
that.
years, yeah.
Yeah, because you just basically didn't know anybody, flew down there, or however you got there, horse and buggy, whatever. You got there, and then you were just like, hey, like coffee shop, right?
I literally just said hi to people. I mean, my plan is I just wanted to push myself. I wanted to see, after I sold my company Spheric, I wanted to see if any of my crazy software ideas. We built software for other companies. We were an agency. We worked with Procter & Gamble, Dole Foods, Johnson & Johnson, building internal portals, kind of like not SharePoint, but they're SharePoint's competitor back in the day. Oracle now bought, it was like the company Plumtree. BEA bought them. Oracle bought BEA. So it's been morphed. But that was the technology that we specialized in. So I want to see if any of my ideas to build a software product would work amongst some of the smartest minds in the world. So I just went down there, didn't know a soul, literally didn't have a high school friend or nothing. Like, I just said, you know what, that's the place to be. And I made a plan before I went there. I said I did the research of all the top startup coffee shops. I was living in the Mission area, and every day I would do, like, 1 week I would do one coffee in a shop in the morning, another one in the afternoon. The next week I would do 2 others. There's about 8 of them in the city: Epicenter, Phil's, Rituals. I mean, there's all, and I would just keep, Blue Bottle. I would just keep going between all of them and just saying hi to anybody that would look my way. A little creepy.
Stay out of Tenderloin, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, Blue Bottle's on the edge. But yeah, it's like I would just. But what's funny? The dumbest thing that I did for a long time, I've told this story a few times, is when people ask me what I did, I would say, well, I don't know. You do not do that in San Francisco. When people say, what do? You better have a good answer. Either you help people or you're building the next thing that's going to disrupt, an industry. And it was actually Paul Graham from Y Combinator that gave me this advice over an email, because I said, like, I'm here, I want to be helpful. He said, entrepreneurs need help the most on marketing. And it was always been a strength of mine. So next time, 3 weeks, I almost came home, dude. On the third week, I still remember I was at the Mobilizer conference. GigaOM had a conference, and I would go to conferences too. And I was sitting there, and I've been to so many conferences in that 3 week period that I had to, you go to the morning, you hear the talks, you grab your box lunch, you go sit down. I tried to sit between 2 people, and I'd like sit down and I'd look and I'd introduce myself. I'd figure 2 people, double the odds. And what do you do? And I'm like, well, I don't know. I just moved here. I sold my house. It's like, boom, they turned around. I was like, well, they're not that was like what's happening all the time. Next person, hey, how do you do? Blah, blah, blah. What do you do? Same answer. They turn around. So I'm sitting in the middle of my fucking box lunch. I'm just so like, I was so upset. I literally left half of it there, got up, threw it in the garbage, and walked home from the venue to my house, which was probably an hour and a half walk. And on that walk, I contemplated, like, why am I here? These people are assholes. I'm Canadian. Why are they so fucking rude? Why won't they, Yeah. And then Paul Graham sent me that email. And the next time I went to a coffee shop, somebody asked me what I do. I said, I help startups with their marketing. Boom. They go, I'm a startup. I need help with marketing. Great. Let me show you how. And that's how I started doing these 2-week kind of, free projects where I would dive in. Because I was technical. I could code and I could put marketing together. I was really hands off. And that's how I built my reputation. I started with a company called Apture. Dave McClure originally introduced me to them. And then I did that for a few other companies, and that's how I built my brand. And then that's where I got the idea for Flowtown. So,
and Sphera was your agency.
Yeah, it was. So company's called Spheric Technologies. We focused on, we worked with Fortune 500 companies to deploy intranets essentially, but we specialize in an existing product that another company built. We became, preferred vendors, and that's how we really became known.
Right. I think a lot of people who listen to this, I think, are running mostly, small web design, digital marketing agencies, maybe in the 2 to 10 to maybe 20 person range. And scaling an agency, as we all know, is very difficult. We had Jason Swink on a few weeks back who gave some great advice.
Jason's the man.
Yeah. I mean, he knows that. And I really want to hear from you, because being able to scale and sell an agency is, I think, maybe one of the hardest things to do in the world. You mentioned you had a specialty in kind of a horizontal, so like specialized in a particular set of technology. Was there anything else? I know you wrote a great blog post that we're going to link to in the show notes about the agency model, like how to build the perfect agency model. Can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing you need to understand is if you do it right, then you're not the center of the business and the product. So a lot of people need to understand is that a great agency has a process where they communicate a core value proposition to the market. They're known for it. They have a system for executing it. They get on, and then the key is ongoing services, monthly reoccurring some kind of retainer model. That's how it's a contract. That's how you build real value in an agency. One of my mentors, when I was building my company Sphere, 2 years in, he sat me down. He said, you do realize that to create real enterprise value, you need to lock in your customers with contracts. Like you need to have, 12 months, 16 months, 24-month contracts, because that's the real value. If you're just doing projects one-off, then, if there's no projects, you don't get paid. So there's no value for somebody else to evaluate. So I just, over the years, I've worked with so many agencies helping them scale their business, because I did it for myself. My wife has Onboardly. Literally, I would say 50% of my friends are either software entrepreneurs or agency owners, dev shops, designers, freelancers. And I just sat down one day and I designed this model. And, the idea is simple: is every agency should have what's called a kind of an onboarding offer. Something that they sell that gets the customer some outcome, right? It's like whatever. If you're a design agency, maybe it's a deep dive on a branding thing. If you're a dev shop, it could be the product specs, the wireframes, the market. For Renee, it was called like the PR launching. It was like essentially the deep dive. It's usually the thing that you give away for free in your proposals. Right? I actually argue that that's the thing you sell. And the reason why is it takes care of the tire kickers. It allows you to systematize and have an account manager maybe execute that process. It creates something to monetize upfront, so it helps with the expectations. But the goal of that outcome is that the customer could take it and execute it themselves. Right. So it needs to be that detailed, and you need to price it accordingly, because obviously you've got time, research, investment in that document. But what happens 90% of the time is that if you do that and they go, okay, I'm going to pay for that initial upfront work, the outcome is something that I can do myself. 90% of the time when you make them the offer to execute it, then they're going to take it. Right. The cool part is then when you go to execute the work is your team has a friggin' done step-by-step playbook, right, of exactly how it has to happen.
I did that once I used to run an agency called Headspace here in Halifax. We were a web design UX shop. And we once it was the Department of Education came to us and said, we want to build an app for teens. And we were like, okay, what does it do? And they were like, I don't know, like a game or something. And for the first time, we always did this a million times. We always did all the upfront work in the proposal for free, like you said. And then, there was scope creep. Things were under scope because we weren't really putting the time in to do it right. And so finally for that one, we just said, $5,000, we'll do a discovery. We'll sit down. We'll listen to your needs. We'll interview people. Do up your wireframes, and then after that, you can go have somebody build it out. And that exactly what you're talking about. After we had built so much trust through that process that they were like, obviously we're going to get you guys to build it now, right? And
yeah, I think that road mapping, that's exactly what it's called, especially for UX. It's road mapping. It's essentially saying, I'm going to discover, I'm going to figure out what you need to do over the next 90 days or whatever, and I'm going to build you the roadmap for you to execute on your own. And if you want to hire us, cool. But that's not the arrangement. Yeah. And yeah, man, 90% of the people are going to take you up on it. And it just makes for a better company. I mean, people want to do their best work, especially in an agency. And if you don't, I think this model solves so many things, right? And that's just the first step, but it really allows your team to do their best work. The second part is the ongoing services, right? And that's the execution of that. But you want to try to figure out how can you get paid every month? And it could be through a monitoring service. It could be through building like a Scrum team that goes like pods. There's a company called Digital Telepathy out of San Diego, good friends of mine, Chuck and the guys there, and they've built this kind of monthly service for their work. I know another company called Web Profits. They do the same thing in the marketing growth side. That's the ongoing services. And then what you want to add on top of that, I call them enhancements, right? So you have your road mapping service that you charge for. Then you have your ongoing services, which is execution of the roadmap plus something you get paid every month for. And then you have enhancements, which could be copywriting, design, like things that are above and beyond, Right. And those are things that you package in these neat little components. You can either have capacity on your team or you partner with somebody external. And those are taught to your team to actually look for the opportunities and present them to the client as enhancements. So that's how you kind of get revenue enhancements. In software, we call that expansion revenue.
Right. Or so upsells and cross-sells.
Upsells and cross-sells. Like I've literally just taken all the things that I've learned in software world and applied it to agencies about building repeatable, scalable models. And here's the beauty of having that road mapping service is everything you do in that road mapping service, every kind of specific section, that becomes your content marketing.
Yeah.
So that's the key. I actually argue everything you do. So Renee, I think in her business, they have 13 things that they as a byproduct of that work. Those 13 things becomes content. Like you write the blog post and then you have a call to action to get on a call to sell them. If they're reading this, they want the outcome, they have the problem, boom, the road mapping service solves that and other stuff. But that's the model. It's simplified, it's easy, it gets rid of tire kickers, it gets rid of you doing custom projects all the time, it gets rid of you doing shitty work, it makes your team feel pumped about doing great work. And it's profitable and scalable.
And scalable. That's the thing is recurring revenue. Like I now run a SaaS business, and after enough time and scale, you start to really see how recurring revenue compounds, and it becomes actually easier as you scale. I think the difficulty with agencies and any kind of service-based business, you could call it a consultancy, whatever, what have you, is that I think people are just afraid to ask for the retainer, right? Because the client goes, well, I just need a website. I just want to pay you for a website, and then it's done, and then you go away, and I don't have to pay anymore. How do you, kind of jump off that ledge, like into the deep end, and start really going hardcore, like, no, retainers, 12-month contracts?
Yeah, well, I start asking them about. I mean, this is sales 101. But the first thing I'd say is like, well, what if somebody posts something? What if an important site links to a page that's broken on your website? Are you going to know about it? They're going to go, no. What if that could have drove revenue to your business because it was in the newspaper, but the newspaper linked to the wrong page on your website? How are you going to know? Well, you wouldn't know. That's what you're paying the monthly retainer for, because we monitor that. We do this, we do that. So like sales is always about saying, how can I understand the customer's potential pains and try to kind of bring them to light, and then say, well, this is the solution to resolve that pain. Right? And then try to put some level of value to that. So it's like, what's a new opportunity worth to you? Well, it's worth 10 grand. Great. So if the newspaper runs a story listing 3 companies that are impressive in your city and they link to the wrong page, and you know that people are reading that and they're highly qualified, and it's broken, it's a 404, you could lose minimum 1 opportunity. Would you agree? Yeah. And you're saying the 500 or the 1,000 or 2,000 a month retainer. And that's just one of the 10 things that we do for you on a monthly basis. You know, we post on your blog. We do all, I mean, you really got to ask yourself, you know, the other day I told this story. I do a video every week on my YouTube channel, so people should definitely check that out. But it was all about like how to get reoccurring revenue for any kind of business. And I tell the story of, you know, my furnace here at my house broke down the other day, and my wife loves to get all, you know, handsy and whatever. And she went in there, tried to change the filter. Okay. It was literally the air filter needed to be changed, and she couldn't get it back in. And I called my brother who built my house. He's a home builder. And I said, Pierre, who do I call? And he said, well, you got to call this company. And I called him up and I'm like, hey, my wife tried to put in the filter, and he's laughing. He's like, what is your wife doing that for? And I said, don't talk to me about that. Focus. And he said, well, we actually have a yearly service where we come, we clean your fireplace, we clean, and all this stuff. And I was just like, well done, sir.
He knows what's going on.
Well done. Yes. And then I'm like, then I call my brother back and I go, bro, why aren't you selling this? Why are you letting him, like, and what about the lawn guy that I got coming to my house? These are all service, the snow guy in the winter. Like, I actually went out and solved these problems, and I'm paying every year for this, where he had the relationship with me and he didn't think of the enhancements that he could have put around me. Even if he's not the one that's responsible for delivering them, he knows those people and he could have got the deal and got a percentage of that. And that's the opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. I used to have, I don't get it so much anymore. People, when I was starting Proposify, people would come to me and they'd say, you know, I only write a proposal every maybe 6 months. So I don't really want to pay every month or every year for a service if I'm only going to use it occasionally. And I say, okay, well, then just keep using Word, because I'm not going to spend time trying to convince somebody who doesn't value the service. I'm going to just spend my time on the people who do, you know, 10 proposals a month and want to save time every month. And I think sometimes it just comes down to going after qualified leads.
Yeah, segmentation. I mean, when we talk about like going after the right customer, you know, the other day I coach a lot of SaaS founders, and one of my clients had a product, and, you know, he had a high churn, right? Like, that's one of the biggest challenges in a lot of SaaS business. They have a high churn number, meaning that people cancel every month. And when I asked them, okay, name me the number one customer segment that you totally rock it for in your customer base. And he said, real estate agents. I said, great. Pulled up the website, looked at it. You do not talk about anything remotely interesting, relevant to a real estate agent at all. You don't even call them out. And he's like, I could just hear through the phone, his hand slapping his forehead. And it's like, boom, one change. All that did was say, I'm going to speak to that customer because their use case, their work structure, the way they worked was super highly relevant to the product. Yeah. And then you ask yourself, okay, well, if it's real estate agents, what are the 2 other big markets? And from those 2, I call it the bowling pin strategy. It's like the first pin, the 2 other, and then the 3 after that. Usually those 6 make a huge market, but you got to strategically roll out your marketing to address it. But that is true for agencies. That's true for any business. We live in a world of personalized, artisanal, handcrafted. I want something made for me. I don't want to hire a social media marketer. If I'm a barbershop, I want to hire the social media marketer for barbershops. Yeah. Okay. That's what we need to start thinking about in regards to the marketing, the positioning, and niching down to what I call an uncomfortably narrow niche.
And, I've given that advice to some people before, and they've said, like, well, I don't, what am I supposed to do? Turn away leads? Like, oh, okay, I'm the social media manager for a barbershop, and like a landscaper comes to me. I'm like, then take them on. Just don't talk about it on your marketing site. If you can do a good job for a landscaper, do it. But that doesn't mean you still market to everybody.
That's what people don't understand is, like, I always joke with my dad. I think it was like 8 years after the fact, he finally bought an iPhone. So like Apple knows who their customer is, right? Kind of like artsy creatives. They want to wear the white, and they're like, they know their core customer, but they attract other people that are on the outskirts, right? And my dad was that guy for so long. They came out with the iPhone color. And the reason my dad bought it, I said, why did you finally make the switch? Because he was a BlackBerry guy forever. He said, he has a flashlight app, this thing.
That's
and I was like, Yeah, but he was like totally on the outside of the core market, but they built a great product that just happened to be relevant and attractive to that person. So like you said, if you build a great service, even though you say you're for barbershops, people that are in the local service industry are going to go, well, I'm like a barbershop. I'm going to reach out to them because I'm looking at their body of work and they seem to get great results. And that's cool. It doesn't mean like when people ask me like, who do you work with? I coach high performing SaaS entrepreneurs. I do have non-SaaS entrepreneurs as clients, but that's not what I go to the market with. That's not what I introduce myself as, right? Like you need to pick and be, I think it's just about being world-class in what you do.
Yeah. If you don't target something, then you target nothing.
Exactly.
And that's bad.
You're the gray IBM. You're nothing special. There's nothing unique.
Absolutely. Dan, it's been a pleasure having you on. People, go check out, it's at danmartell.com/agency model. There'll be a link to that in the show notes. You can get more information. There's more great posts. Dan, where else should people go to check you out?
Well, I wanted to, because I knew I was on here with a bunch of agency owners, I wanted to put together a special download for everybody. So I got a video you can all get at Dan Martell, 2lsmartell.com/scale. And I'm going to give you guys 3 videos specifically to help you scale your business. Like I mentioned, I do have clients that I work with outside the space, the agency model. I've kind of blown up a little bit and really just help you be more effective in your work. Because a lot of my software clients actually came from the agency world before.
Basecamp,
Basecamp, FreshBooks, Shopify. I mean, it's a pattern. So I want to be as helpful as I can. So if you go to Dan Martell, 2lsmartell.com/scale, you can do there. And I'm on Twitter, on my YouTube channel every week. I publish new videos to help you live a bigger life and a bigger business. And I would love to engage in your audience. So hit me up.
Dan's content is awesome. I'm a big fan of it. And you know what? The reason that I'm even able to publish these videos twice a week and have articles and post them everywhere and do it with regularity as of like 6 months ago was I attended one of Dan's events. And he laid out this strategy for basically like bulk creating content and doing it in a really kind of organized fashion. And that seriously has changed the way I produce content. Thank you.
Thanks, Kyle. It's the 6 days of effort, 12 months worth of content is what I do.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that resonated with you. And if you get on my email list, a lot of you guys, I may slowly trickle that out over time.
That's awesome. Thanks so much for joining me here today, Dan.
Cool. It's been a pleasure.
All right.
Thanks, Kyle.
Hope you guys enjoyed that episode with Dan. I know I did. To get links and show notes, head over to proposify.biz/podcast and check out the episode with Dan Martell. Make sure that you subscribe so you get more of this every week. We're doing multiple episodes, and we're everywhere. YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes. Make sure you get in on this, and thanks for watching.